Welcome to Sign Facts, where every movie hides a secret. Every scene tells a deeper story. And every frame contains details most viewers never notice, from legendary blockbusters and mind-bending science fiction to dark thrillers, unforgettable horror, and hidden cinematic gems. We explore the facts, theories, Easter eggs, behind-the-scenes secrets, and untold stories that make movies truly unforgettable. This isn't just watching movies, this is discovering what lies beneath them. Subscribe to Sign Facts and step beyond the screen. We learn that Hobbs has a young daughter, and he asks his partner to take her out for food so the two of them can speak privately. Once they're alone, Hobbs reveals the truth. Owen Shaw has a brother, and he's far more dangerous. Deckard Shaw's file paints a grim picture. A former British Special Forces, a government weapon forged for black operations no one wants on record. When he became too dangerous and knew too much, they tried to erase him. 2 elite agents were sent after him. Both failed. For 6 years, Shaw has operated like a phantom. Dom asks where he can find him. A nearby agent warns him not to pursue it, but Dom Toretto has never been one to walk away from a fight. Despite the warning, Dom makes his position clear. If Shaw wants a war between brothers, he'd better not miss. For safety, Mia has been sent to the Dominican Republic, staying under Mando's protection. He jokes that securing their safe house back in Rio was no small task, but having Dom's family under his roof is an honor, and he assures her no one will touch them. Soon he hands her the phone. Dom is calling. He explains that the trouble brewing in London has now reached their doorstep. Mia admits she still hasn't told Brian about the baby. She knows that once he finds out, he'll choose to stay with her and Jack, and right now Dom needs Brian in the fight. Dom promises they'll regroup in Los Angeles in 2 days, but first he has to go to Tokyo to pay his respects to Han. In Japan, Twinkie tells Sean that someone important is asking for him. After wrapping up a street race, Sean meets Dom and admits that Han rarely talked about his past. He believed in moving forward, never looking back at enemies he'd left behind. Sean hands Dom a few items recovered from the wreckage, a photograph of Giselle and the familiar cross necklace. The sight of it hardens Dom's resolve. At Han's funeral, Tej and Roman reunite with the crew. Standing before his friend's grave, Dom quietly promises vengeance. Tej notices a suspicious car circling nearby and warns the others they're being watched. Roman mutters that he's already been to too many funerals. Brian calmly replies that there's only one more left. Deckard Shaw. Moments later, Dom jumps into his Charger and tears off after the suspicious vehicle. The chase barrels through city streets and into a tunnel. The two drivers line up head-on and no hesitation, no brakes, and slam into each other at full speed. When the dust settles, Shaw calmly steps out of his wrecked car. Dom follows, accusing him of reinforcing the frame. Shaw smirks, warning that targeting a man's family comes with consequences. At the same message Dom once delivered to Owen. Dom grips his sledgehammer, ready for a brawl, but Shaw raises a handgun instead. This isn't a back alley fight. Suddenly armed operatives descend from above, surrounding Dom. Shaw slips away while Dom fights off the incoming soldiers. Before things escalate further, a calm voice cuts through the chaos. A man known only as Mr. Nobody intervenes, claiming Hobbs recommended him. As police sirens approach, he reminds Dom that Shaw isn't the only threat in play and offers a solution. At a covert operations base in California, Mr. Nobody lays things out over a bucket of beer. Shaw's power lies in anonymity. He's a ghost. But Mr. Nobody isn't interested in Shaw directly. Instead, he proposes a trade. A terrorist named Mosjikant has abducted a brilliant hacker named Ramsey. She created a surveillance program called God's Eye, capable of tapping into nearly every digital system simultaneously. Phones, satellites, cameras, banking networks. In the wrong hands it's unstoppable. With it, tracking Shaw would be effortless, and without it he remains invisible. Official rescue missions are off the table. Dom questions why he should help instead of continuing his hunt. Mr. Nobody clarifies: retrieve Ramsey, gain access to God's Eye, and Shaw won't be able to hide ever again. Dom agrees, but on one condition: he does it his way, with his family. Mr. Nobody anticipated that and has already assembled the crew. Intelligence reveals Ramsey will be transported through the Caucasus Mountains in Azerbaijan, inside a heavily fortified convoy. If she reaches her destination, she disappears for good. Roman quickly sums up the problem. They'll have to intercept a convoy secured for over a mile in both directions. Fed up with always following orders, Roman declares it's time they start calling the plays. He suggests attacking at the most fortified stretch of the mountain pass. The others call it impossible, which is exactly why Roman insists it's perfect and no one would expect it. He looks to Tetra execution. Mr. Nobody gives them access to his expansive garage and officially welcomes Letty back into the fold. Dom approaches her quietly. She tells him she went back to the house. There's nothing left but ashes. When she sees the cross necklace again, something flickers behind her eyes. Memory is slowly fighting its way back. The team lays out the operation. Speed alone won't win this one. They'll need precision. Later, in a dark cargo hold, the crew waits inside their vehicles. The metal floor trembles. Tej cracks a joke about Roman's nerves. Suddenly alarms sound. A rear hatch opens, revealing they're aboard a massive aircraft flying high over the mountains. One by one, the cars roar forward, straight out of the plane and into open sky. Roman freezes, staring at the drop, terrified by his own strategy, and refuses to move. Without warning, Tej activates the parachute rig attached to Roman's car, launching him out anyway. Suspended beneath parachutes, the cars descend toward the winding mountain road below. Tires hit asphalt in sequence as they prepare to intercept the convoy. Roman is still drifting awkwardly, but the team regroups quickly and identifies the armored truck likely holding Ramsey. Once spotted, the convoy mobilizes aggressively. Tej takes point in his armored vehicle, smashing through the enemy formation to create an opening. Heavy artillery fire rains down, complicating the maneuver. Dom and Letty pull alongside the truck and latch onto its reinforced door with cables with coordinated force from Brian and Tej. They rip the door clean off. Brian shatters his own windshield, climbs across vehicles, and launches himself into the moving truck, taking down the guards inside as the mission spirals into full chaos. Inside the armored truck, Brian finds Ramsey shaken and defensive. She mistakes him for another threat and tells him to stay back, but he calmly reassures her that he's there to get her out alive. Before they can regroup, another hostile vehicle slams into position. Timing is critical. Brian guides Ramsey out and helps her leap into Dom's car just seconds before Shaw crashes into them. Elsewhere on the road, Brian squares off with another skilled mercenary. Faster and sharper. Brian quickly realizes he's met his match. Meanwhile, Dom focuses on keeping Ramsey safe, maneuvering aggressively through the winding mountain terrain, swerving past gunfire and neutralizing attackers as they close in. Letty and Brian engage yet another enemy vehicle, but chaos erupts when a shot hits the truck driver. The massive vehicle veers uncontrollably toward the edge of a cliff. Brian tries to escape the cab, but enemy fire pins him down. The truck teeters over the edge, half suspended above a deadly drop. At that crucial moment, Roman barrels in and drums Shaw away from Dom, disrupting his attack. Brian manages to climb free just as the truck begins to tip. It slides forward, gravity pulling it into open air, but Letty races in at full speed and steers her car close enough for Brian to grab hold. He clings to the side as the truck plummets into the abyss below. Shaw survives the crash and disappears once more. Dom tells Roman to regroup with the others, but the fight isn't over. Dom soon finds himself surrounded at the edge of a cliff by dozens of armed vehicles. Jacan steps out, admitting Dom's team has become a serious inconvenience, and offers him a deal: hand over the girl and walk away alive. Dom tells Ramsey to put on her helmet. He revs the engine, spins the car in tight circles, and positions himself at the very edge of the mountain. Even Shaw watches with curiosity. Gunfire erupts from all directions. Without hesitation, Dom floors it, launching the car straight off the cliff, against impossible odds. They survive the plunge. Later, the crew regroups at a quiet dock to let Ramsey recover. She's still shaken, unsure whether to thank them for saving her or yell at them for driving her off her mountain. Dom cuts straight to the point and asks about God's eye. Ramsey reveals she sent the program to a trusted contact in Abu Dhabi. The team is stunned at how quickly she shares the information. She explains she's already profiled them as the former cop, the tech mastermind, the natural leader, the fearless woman, and the Joker. Tej compliments her assessment but jokingly clarifies one detail: Letty isn't Dom's wife. Ramsey assumes they're government operatives. Dom simply replies, "We share the same objective." He tells Tej to set things in motion. They're heading to the Middle East. On the flight to Abu Dhabi, Brian and Dom reflect on the mountain mission. Brian admits he misses the adrenaline, the chaos, the edge. Dom reminds him that from day one he saw Brian's courage, but what impresses him most isn't the stunts or the fights. It's the man Brian became, a devoted husband to his sister, a loving father to Jack. When they arrive in Abu Dhabi, the crew rolls in with style, stepping out of high-end supercars beneath towering skyscrapers and breathtaking architecture. Roman jokes that the heat he's feeling isn't from the desert sun, it's from the luxury surrounding them. He and Tej both notice the same stunning woman and immediately start competing over her with rock paper scissors, until Safar interrupts, advising them not to try their luck. Safar greets Ramsey warmly. She quickly asks about God's eye. He admits he sold it. Dom insists they need it back, revealing that Ramsey embedded critical data inside the device. Safar reassures them it's secure, but retrieving it won't be easy. The buyer is a wealthy Jordanian prince who's had the device embedded inside his prized hypercar, a bulletproof supercar capable of reaching nearly 390 km/h, and it's locked away in his penthouse vault. Conveniently, the prince is hosting a lavish party the following day, on the longest day of the year. That may be their only opportunity. The crew suits up in elegant attire to infiltrate the high-rise tower. Dom and Letty step into the elevator together, both admitting they feel out of place amid such extravagance. Dom can't help but admire how stunning she looks for him. Memories resurface, and for Letty, faint flashes begin to return. The elevator doors open onto a world of gold-plated luxury, exotic detailed copyright core, and guests adorned in shimmering body paint. Elsewhere, Tej and Ramsey begin hacking into the building's systems. Security is intense. Cameras and armed guards monitor every corridor. Letty prepares to move, but Kara, a skilled enforcer, spots her. Letty quickly disables a guard and advances toward the prince's private suite. Tej instructs her to cut a specific wire to gain deeper access into the network, then signals Roman that it's time for a distraction. Roman theatrically draws attention to himself, creating a scene to buy the others time. Meanwhile, Dom and Brian enter the vault housing the hypercar. Brian can't resist admiring it. Worth $3 million, capable of going from 0 to 60 in 3 seconds, with only 7 ever built. Dom lifts the vehicle so Brian can check underneath for the embedded device. As Letty prepares to exit, Kara confronts her face-to-face, flanked by guards. Letty jokes that one of the guards must have been distracted by her charm. Kara coldly replies that she has none. The alarm system suddenly triggers, sealing the building and shutting down the exits. Kara's team attacks, and Letty fights fiercely inside the prince's suite, taking down several guards in brutal hand-to-hand combat. In the vault, heavy security shutters begin closing around Dom and Brian. Back upstairs, Letty and Kara square off. The fight is vicious, crashing through furniture and walls. At times Kara seems to overpower her, but Letty manages to grab a blade and shifts the momentum. Ramsey urgently warns them that an armed squad is heading straight for the vault and time is running out. Dom tells Brian there's no time to hesitate. They're taking the car with them. As security drags Roman away from the party floor, Letty and Kara crash through a balcony, plummeting from the second level. Tej struggles to keep the vault doors from sealing completely, buying them only a few precious seconds. Dom ignites the hypercar's engine just as Tej neutralizes a guard rushing in to detain them. The engine roars to life, and with no subtlety left, Dom smashes through interior walls, sending debris flying and guests scattering in panic. The once glamorous party dissolves into chaos. Suddenly Shaw appears, weapon drawn, firing rounds into the ceiling. Tej and Ramsey scramble for cover while bullets ricochet around Dom. The armored supercar absorbs the gunfire as Dom barrels forward, even clipping Shaw. before the vehicle skids to a halt in front of a massive glass window. Without hesitation, Dom floors it. The car launches through the glass and soars into open air, straight toward the neighboring tower. Inside, Dom realizes the brakes are compromised as the vehicle keeps accelerating, now hurtling toward yet another building. As Brian retrieves the embedded chip, they brace themselves, and at the last possible second both men leap from the car. Dom barely catches the edge of the structure as the supercar crashes into the third tower and explodes in a fiery blast. That night they regroup at Safar's garage. Safar complains bitterly about securing them access to one of the most exclusive events in the region, only for them to leave the place in ruins. Mr. Nobody arrives shortly after, dryly commenting on Dom's interpretation of low profile. They ask Safar for privacy. Brian hands over the chip. Mr. Nobody congratulates them on completing their end of the bargain, a messy but effective and confirms his tactical teams are on standby. As promised, he returns the device to Ramsey, giving her authorization to activate God's Eye. The system powers up. Ramsey explains that every camera-enabled device across the region is scanning for Shaw's face. Within moments they trace him to an abandoned automated factory. Dom suggests waiting until morning, assuming Shaw will be fatigued, but it soon becomes clear that Dom intends to move without his crew. He argues that they're elite drivers, not executioners. Brian sees through him and insists on going. When they reach the factory, Mr. Nobody's operatives prepare for a coordinated assault. Inside, Shaw calmly eats what appears to be his last meal. Amused that only a dozen men were sent after him, he pulls a grenade pin with his teeth and places it casually on the table. Everyone steps back except Dom, who stands firm, saying he's ready to face whatever comes. Shaw mocks their effort and cryptically reminds them that sometimes enemies share common ground. Right then, the lights cut out. Explosions rip through the facility gates as Jacan's armed forces storm in. Chaos erupts, and the two opposing sides are forced to fight off a new threat. One by one, Dom's allies are pinned down. Mr. Nobody switches on specialized night vision goggles and begins eliminating attackers with ruthless efficiency until he's hit even wounded. He keeps fighting, a grin spreading across his face despite the blood. Dom and Brian fire back, realizing they must abandon God's Eye to escape. Shaw tosses a grenade, destroying what little tactical advantage remained. The team flees in a transport truck, carrying the injured Mr. Nobody with them. During the escape they assess his injuries. He insists they leave him behind. His extraction team is inbound by helicopter. Before parting ways he warns them that Ramsey is the true target, only she can access the deeper layers of God's Eye. With no choice, they move on. Dom tells Brian that the fight is shifting and it's coming to their streets. Back in Los Angeles, they assume Jacan will use God's Eye to locate them. Tej proposes hacking it, but signal range limitations make that difficult. Brian suggests keeping Ramsey close and mobile while Dom handles Shaw directly. Later, Brian calls Mia. He tells her the situation is escalating if she doesn't hear from him within 24 hours. She needs to move on for Jack's sake. But Mia refuses to say goodbye. She finally reveals the secret she's been holding. They're having a baby girl. She admits she was afraid he'd resent a quieter life. Brian reassures her that the best decision he ever made was walking into the cafe copyright years ago and ordering the worst tuna sandwich imaginable, because it led him to her. They tell each other they love one another, fully aware of the risks ahead. Meanwhile, Dom returns home. In the quiet of his garage, he uncovers his father's old car for one final ride, one final reckoning. High above Los Angeles, aboard a helicopter, Jacan orders God's Eye activated. Shaw will handle Dom. They'll focus on Ramsey. As the system locks onto its targets, the crew splits up. Ramsey begins scrambling signals to interfere with the tracking, which triggers Jacan to deploy a lethal drone. Brian shields Ramsey, swerving through traffic. As the drone fires, he slides beneath a semi-truck just before a missile obliterates it behind them. They narrowly escape. Elsewhere, Shaw intercepts Dom. Their paths converge once more as Dom heads toward a multi-level parking structure. Police units attempt to intervene after detecting extreme speeds, but a missile obliterates a squad car mid-pursuit. And once again, Dom Toretto and Deckard race directly toward each other on a collision course. Across the city, Brian and Roman coordinate their escape. In a perfectly timed maneuver, they align their cars side by side, and Ramsey climbs through the open windows while both vehicles are still speeding forward. Seconds later, a missile locks onto Brian's abandoned car and destroys it just after he ditches it. Deckard realizes Ramsey is still alive and orders the drone to follow the hacking signal. The hunt intensifies. Meanwhile, Dom takes the fight vertical, using debris and elevation to maneuver his car above Shaw's position and fire downward. The high-speed chaos spills into live news coverage, flashing across television screens, including one in Hobbs's hospital room. Deckard, aware that the satellite tower is assisting Ramsey's hack, orders its destruction. A missile obliterates the tower, cutting off the signal. Ramsey loses connection. Tej confirms the worst: the tower's gone. Hobbs, watching from his bed, pieces everything together. Ignoring medical orders, he tears off his remaining cast, tests his arm, and prepares to return to the fight. He says goodbye to his daughter, telling her that Elena will stay with her. Then he walks out. Back on the streets, Shaw climbs from his wrecked vehicle, discards his firearm, and grabs a steel rod. Dom steps forward with a gun drawn, asking if Shaw really thought this would be settled with fists alone. But after a pause, Dom tosses his weapon aside as this is personal. They collide in a savage hand-to-hand fight. Tej radios Brian, instructing him to reach a communications tower to manually restore the signal. The transmission is intercepted, and enemies are dispatched to intercept him. Gunfire erupts throughout the city. Roman barely avoids getting shredded by incoming rounds and calls for backup. Letty intervenes as Dom continues battling Shaw. A rocket obliterates Roman's car, but Ramsey survives, having leapt into Letty's vehicle moments earlier. Brian scales the tower to reroute the system, but he's ambushed by the same mercenary from the mountains. A brutal fight breaks out high above the street. The mercenary initially overpowers him, but Brian manages to wrap a cable around him and sends him crashing through a lower access shaft. At street level, Hobbs storms in behind the wheel of an ambulance. When Letty's car is targeted by a missile, Hobbs slams into the drone's trajectory and neutralizes it with sheer force. With Tej guiding him, Brian restores enough signal strength for Ramsey to regain partial control of God's Eye. Dom and Shaw continue their relentless duel until Deckard's helicopter descends overhead, weapons locking onto both men. A missile strike fractures the parking structure beneath them. Just before finishing Shaw off, Dom tells him that in street fights the pavement always decides the outcome. He stomps down hard, shattering the weakened concrete and sending Shaw crashing to the level below. The helicopter pivots toward Dom, but Hobbs appears again, unleashing heavy fire into the aircraft. Amid the crossfire, bullets rip into Letty's car. She calls out for help. Desperate, Dom grabs Shaw's discarded grenade bag and jumps back into his vehicle. Weaving through debris and missiles, he accelerates and launches his car into the helicopter, grazing it before crashing violently onto the street below. The wreck is devastating. The team rushes to Dom. Hobbs spots the grenades lodged in the helicopter and fires until the aircraft explodes in a fireball. He clears debris off Dom's crushed car so they can reach him. Brian tries everything to revive his friend, but there's no response. Letty pushes him aside and cradles Dom in her arms. Through tears, she tells him she remembers everything at their wedding in the Dominican Republic, the necklace he gave her, the life they built together. She says if he leaves, she leaves too. After a tense silence, Dom weakly responds, teasing her for taking so long to remember. Relief floods over them. Later, Letty asks why he never told her they were married. Dom admits he couldn't force her heart. She had to find her way back on her own. Days pass. Hobbs personally escorts Deckard Shaw to a high-security CIA black site, walking him through a corridor lined with weapons, subtle reminders that Hobbs would gladly finish what they started. Meanwhile, the rest of the crew gathers at the beach, enjoying a rare, peaceful day. Brian plays with Mia and Jack in the surf. One by one, the others watch quietly. They understand that Brian deserves a life beyond danger. Things won't be the same without him. Dom quietly gets up, choosing not to say goodbye. Later, at a stoplight on an open road, a familiar engine pulls alongside him. Brian a one last ride. As they sit there, Dom reflects on how he's always lived life a quarter mile at a time, and how Brian was the only one who truly understood that mindset. Through every race, every risk, every sacrifice, they became more than friends. They became brothers. The light turns green, they hit the gas together. Dom's voice carries the memory of their journey, wherever life takes them. That bond won't fade. But now their roads must split, and as they drive side by side for one final stretch, they know some goodbyes don't need to be spoken. Analysis: what if I told you that one of the most over-the-top action franchises in Hollywood history delivered one of the most emotional goodbyes cinema has ever seen? This is Furious 7, the film that didn't just raise the stakes, it changed the soul of the franchise. By 2015, the Fast Saga had already transformed from underground street racing to global, gravity-defying action. Cars were flying out of planes. Skyscrapers were being smashed through. The scale was bigger than ever. But this time something was different. Behind the explosions, behind the roaring engines, there was real emotion, real loss, real weight. When Paul Walker tragically passed away during production, the future of the film and the franchise was uncertain. Many believed it couldn't be finished. Others wondered if it even should be. Instead, Furious 7 became something far more powerful than just another sequel. It became a farewell, a story about revenge on the surface, but underneath, a story about brotherhood, legacy, and knowing when to let go. And by the time the engines quiet down and the road splits in two, you realize this isn't just about fast cars anymore. It's about family. In this video, we're diving deep into what makes Furious 7 the emotional peak of the franchise, from its explosive action to the ending that left millions speechless. Buckle up, as this ride hits differently. Before we dive into the chaos, the revenge, and the emotional farewell, let's set the stage. Furious 7 was released in 2015 and marked a major turning point for the franchise. For the first time, the director's chair was taken by James Wan, a filmmaker known not for car chases but for crafting tension and horror hits like The Conjuring. That shift brought a sharper, more cinematic intensity to the action. Front and center, we return to Dominic Toretto, played by Vin Diesel, alongside Brian O'Connor, portrayed by Paul Walker. The familiar crew is back: Letty, Roman, and Ted J, and this time they're joined by an unstoppable new threat, Deckard Shaw, played by Jason Statham. And this isn't just another random villain, he's personal. The story picks up after the events of Fast Furious 6. The crew has earned their freedom and is trying to live normal lives, but peace doesn't last long in this world. Set across global locations, from quiet American suburbs to the deserts of Abu Dhabi, the film expands the scale once again. What begins as retaliation quickly turns into an international mission involving cutting-edge surveillance technology and a race against time. But here's what makes this entry different. Yes, it's explosive. Yes, it's outrageous. But beneath the spectacle lies a grounded emotional core. The stakes are no longer just about winning a fight or pulling off a job. They're about protecting family and preserving what matters most. If you're new to the series, this film works as a high-octane action thriller on its own. If you followed the journey from the beginning, this chapter hits much deeper, and that's where the real story begins. On the surface, Furious 7 looks like pure, unapologetic action, fast cars, explosions, fights that level entire city blocks. But if you peel back the layers, you'll realize this movie is doing something much bigger than just delivering spectacle. At its core, Furious 7 is a high-stakes action thriller. It blends revenge drama with heist mechanics and even a touch of espionage. There's a global surveillance program called God's Eye. There are covert operations. There are tactical missions. It almost feels like the Fast Saga briefly stepped into James Bond territory. But here's the twist. The real genre of this movie isn't just action, it's family drama disguised as action. Every punch thrown, every car launched out of a plane, every risk taken circles back to one central theme: loyalty. Loyalty to your crew, loyalty to your word, loyalty to the people you call family, even if they're not blood. And then there's revenge. Deckard Shaw isn't just a villain, he's a brother avenging his fallen sibling. In a strange way, he mirrors Dom, Both men are driven by the same principle: protect your own. That parallel adds depth. It turns what could have been a generic good versus bad conflict into something more personal. Emotionally, the tone of Furious 7 walks a fine line. It's loud and outrageous one minute and surprisingly intimate the next. Between the skyscraper jumps and street brawls, you get quiet conversations about fatherhood, about settling down, about what happens when the race finally ends. That balance is what makes this film stand out. It's built for action lovers, yes, but it's also for longtime fans who have grown with these characters over the years. Because by this point in the franchise, the explosions aren't the main attraction anymore, other relationships are. That's what gives Furious 7 its emotional horsepower. Let's dive into the story. And this is where things go from personal to explosive. The film opens with a warning. Deckard Shaw, a former elite assassin, walks into a hospital room where his brother lies unconscious after the events of the previous film. In that quiet, controlled moment, he makes one thing clear: he's coming for Dom and his crew. Not for money, not for power, for revenge. Soon after, Shaw begins striking with precision. A bombing rocks the Toretto home. Hobbs is taken out of action in a brutal fight. The message is clear: no one is safe. Dom realizes they're not chasing a villain this time, they're being hunted. Enter Mr. Nobody, a shadowy government operative who offers a deal. If Dom and his team help retrieve a powerful surveillance device known as God's Eye, they'll gain the ability to track Shaw anywhere in the world. It's a mission that takes them global. First stop, a daring mountain rescue. The team literally drives cars out of a cargo plane, parachuting onto winding cliffside roads to intercept a convoy. It's insane, it's reckless, it's classic Fast, but on a scale we've never seen before. After successfully rescuing Ramsey, the hacker who created God's Eye, the team learns the device is hidden inside a hypercar owned by a Middle Eastern billionaire, which leads to one of the most iconic sequences in the franchise. Dom and Brian infiltrate a high-security penthouse in Abu Dhabi and end up launching a light hypersport through not one, not two, but 3 skyscrapers. It's absurd, it's unforgettable, and it sets the stage for the final act. With God's Eye finally in their possession, the team returns to Los Angeles to set a trap for Shaw. The city becomes a war zone. Streets collapse, drones attack, and the crew splits up to protect Ramsey while Dom faces Shaw head-on. The fight between them isn't just physical, it's philosophical. 2 men bound by the same code: protect your family at all costs. And when the dust settles, when the wreckage stops burning, the story shifts. Because this isn't just about defeating the villain, it's about deciding what kind of life comes next, and that decision changes everything. Now let's talk about the ending, not just what happens, but what it truly means. After the chaos in Los Angeles, the collapsing parking structures, the drone warfare, the city torn apart, everything comes down to one final confrontation: Dom versus Shaw. No team, no gadgets, just 2 men who live by the same code: protect your family at any cost. The fight is brutal, personal, raw. Dom doesn't just want to stop Shaw, he wants to end the cycle of revenge. And when Shaw is finally defeated, Dom makes a choice. He doesn't kill him. Instead, Shaw is taken into custody. That decision matters, because for the first time, Dom breaks away from vengeance. He chooses closure over destruction, growth over rage. But that's not the real ending. The real ending comes quietly. Brian has been wrestling with something throughout the film: the tension between adrenaline and responsibility, between the fast life and fatherhood. In the final scene, the crew gathers on a beach. There's laughter, sunlight, peace. Dom notices Brian watching his family, and without saying it directly, he understands. They share one last drive, and no explosions, no enemies, just 2 brothers on an open road. Then they reach a crossroads, 2 separate highways stretching in different directions. Brian smiles and takes the exit. The camera lingers. Dom watches him drive away. The road splits. The music rises. It's not just a character leaving the story, it's a tribute, a farewell to Paul Walker, handled not with spectacle but with sincerity. The split road symbolizes choice. One path continues the fight, the other chooses family, peace, legacy. Brian doesn't die. He doesn't fall in battle, he drives off into the sunset. And somehow that makes it even more powerful, because in the world of Fast Furious, family isn't just about who stands beside you in the fight. Hey, it's about knowing when to let them go. That's why the ending of Furious 7 isn't just emotional, it's unforgettable. Now here is where Furious 7 gets even more powerful, because beneath the explosions and impossible stunts, the film is layered with subtle details most people don't notice on the first watch. Let's start with the most important symbol in the entire movie, the road. Throughout the franchise, roads have always meant freedom, speed, escape. But in Furious 7, the road represents something deeper, a choice. Early in the film we hear conversations about settling down, about fatherhood, about what comes after the race. Those lines don't feel heavy at first, but by the end they carry emotional weight. Then comes the final scene at the literal fork in the road. Two highways, two futures. That visual isn't accidental, it symbolizes Dom continuing forward into the life he knows, while Brian chooses a different path, not death, not tragedy, just a different direction. Here's another detail many viewers miss. Notice how the film gradually gives Brian quieter, more grounded moments, scenes with his son, conversations about domestic life, fewer reckless solo heroics. That shift feels natural within the story, but it's also the filmmakers gently preparing us for goodbye. There's powerful mirroring at play too. The beach scene at the end echoes earlier franchise gatherings. The difference this time is there's no mission ahead, no looming threat, just reflection. Even the way the camera frames Brian in the final drive, a slightly softened lighting, lingering shots, it feels like the movie itself doesn't want to cut away. And then there's the soundtrack. See You Again isn't just a song choice, it functions like a narrative device. The lyrics directly reflect the journey from friendship to brotherhood to farewell. Furious 7 hides its emotional punches inside spectacle. You come for cars jumping through skyscrapers, but if you look closely, you'll see a film quietly saying goodbye, one symbol at a time. Now let's step behind the camera, because the story of how Furious 7 was made is just as powerful as what we see on screen. Midway through production in 2013, tragedy struck. Paul Walker passed away in a car accident. Filming immediately stopped. The future of the movie was uncertain. There were unfinished scenes, unwritten endings, and a massive emotional weight hanging over the entire cast and crew. For months, the question wasn't how to finish the film, it was whether they even should. Eventually production resumed, but the script was rewritten to respectfully retire Brian O'Connor instead of killing him off. The goal wasn't shock value, it was dignity. To complete the remaining scenes, Paul Walker's brothers, Caleb and Cody Walker, stepped in as body doubles. Combined with carefully crafted CGI, the team was able to finish Brian's arc in a way that felt seamless and heartfelt. And then there's the action. The skyscraper jump scene in Abu Dhabi. Multiple Lighten Hypersport replicas were built and destroyed during filming, and it became one of the most expensive sequences in the franchise. The mountain parachute drop. Real cars were actually dropped from planes to capture authentic footage before visual effects were added. But here's the most unbelievable statistic: Furious 7 went on to earn over $1.5 billion worldwide. It became one of the highest-grossing films of all time at that point, and the biggest entry in the franchise. What could have been a production disaster turned into a global phenomenon, and maybe that's what makes it even more special, because Furious 7 wasn't just finished, it was completed with purpose, with care, and with a tribute the world would never forget. To truly understand Furious 7, we have to compare it not just to other action films, but to its own franchise, because this movie didn't just continue the Fast saga, it elevated it. Let's rewind for a second. Back in 2001, The Fast and the Furious was about underground street race in a small cruise, personal stakes, nitrous tanks, and pink slips. Then came Fast 5, the turning point. That film transformed the series into a full-blown heist action franchise, bigger set pieces, bigger villains, a bigger world. Furious 7 takes that formula and pushes it to the absolute extreme. Cars don't just race anymore, they fly out of planes, they crash through skyscrapers, they defy gravity as if physics were optional. Compared to Fast Furious 6, The action here is louder, faster, and more explosive. But it's not just about scale, it's about emotion. That's where Furious 7 separates itself. If Fast 5 reinvented the franchise, Furious 7 gave it heart. Now let's zoom out beyond the Fast universe and stack it up against franchises like Mission Impossible or James Bond. Those films lean toward grounded espionage and tactical realism. Furious 7 doesn't compete on realism, it competes on intensity, on loyalty, on spectacle driven by character relationships rather than government missions. Where other franchises focus on saving the world, Fast focuses on saving family, and that difference is huge. You might argue that Furious 7 is where realism officially left the building, and you wouldn't be wrong. But in exchange, it delivers something few action films manage to achieve: emotional payoff that feels earned after years of storytelling. It's not the most grounded entry, it's not the most realistic, but in terms of impact this might just be the franchise's peak. When Furious 7 hit theaters in 2015, it wasn't just another sequel, it was an event. Audiences didn't walk into this movie expecting subtle realism. They came for the spectacle of the parachuting cars, the skyscraper jumps, the street-level warfare, and they got all of it. But what they didn't expect was to leave the theater emotional. The tribute to Paul Walker changed the conversation completely. Social media exploded. The ending went viral. "See You Again" dominated charts worldwide. Suddenly this wasn't just a blockbuster, it was a cultural moment. At the box office, the numbers were staggering. Over $1.5 billion globally. It became one of the highest-grossing films ever at the time, and the biggest in the franchise's history. Now, what about critics? Reviews were generally positive, though not without criticism. Many acknowledged the physics-defying action as absurd but also praised the emotional weight and sincerity behind the story. Some critics argued the franchise had officially abandoned realism, others said it didn't matter, because Furious 7 knew exactly what it was and delivered it with confidence. For fans, this was the emotional peak of the series. For casual viewers, it was proof that even the loudest action films can carry heart. Was it perfect? Was it divisive? A little. But overrated? Hard to say, because when a film makes millions of people cheer 1 minute and tear up the next, that's not just success, that's impact. And Furious 7 made an impact the franchise will likely never replicate again. So after all the explosions, the revenge, the global chaos, and that unforgettable farewell, where does Furious 7 truly stand? Let's break it down. First, the strengths. The action set pieces are massive, not just bigger than previous films, but bold enough to redefine what the franchise could attempt. Cars flying out of planes, skyscraper jumps, brutal hand-to-hand combat, it's pure cinematic adrenaline. Then there's the villain. Deckard Shaw isn't just another obstacle, he's calculated, personal, relentless. His presence adds real tension, pushing the crew harder than ever before. But above all else, the greatest strength of Furious 7 is its emotion. This is the moment where the franchise stops being just about speed and becomes about legacy. The final tribute to Brian O'Connor elevates the entire film into something meaningful. Now the weaknesses. Let's be honest, the physics are completely abandoned, logic occasionally takes a backseat, and some side characters don't get the depth they deserve. But here's the key question. Does it matter? Because Furious 7 doesn't aim for grounded realism, it aims to be larger than life, and within that mission, it succeeds. So who should watch this movie? If you're an action fan craving spectacle, it delivers. If you've followed the franchise from the beginning, this chapter hits the hardest. If you want an action film that balances chaos with heart, this is the one. Overall, Furious 7th may not be the most realistic entry in the saga, but it is, without question, the most emotional. And sometimes that's what makes a movie unforgettable. In the end, it's not about how fast you drive, it's about who's beside you on the road. And Furious 7 makes sure you never forget that. Reviews another year, another entry in the Fast and Furious saga, and this installment carries added weight, as it marks the final appearance of Paul Walker following his tragic passing in a car accident. The film naturally becomes something of a tribute, particularly in its closing moments. though at times it's noticeable that his role had to be completed through archival footage, body doubles, and digital effects. While the tribute is heartfelt, the technical patchwork can occasionally pull you out of the experience. Beyond that emotional layer, the formula remains largely unchanged. After the events of the previous chapter left Owen Shaw hospitalized, his brother Deckard Shaw, Jason Statham, steps into the spotlight, seeking revenge. He wastes no time taking out Hobbs, Dwayne Johnson, early on and setting his sights on Dom and the crew. The story unfolds across globe-trotting locations, including an extravagant sequence in Abu Dhabi, delivering the franchise's trademark spectacle. That said, the film runs long and often pushes believability far past its limits. The creative team appears determined to outdo itself with increasingly gravity-defying car stunts, vehicles soaring through the sky, leaping between skyscrapers, or dropping from planes. While fans have come to expect over-the-top action, some of these moments stretch logic to the point where emotional investment begins to waver. Still, there are undeniable highlights. A multi-vehicle chase stands out as one of the film's most exciting sequences, and the hand-to-hand combat scenes bring a satisfying intensity. The heavy reliance on CGI is evident, but the explosive action delivers the adrenaline rush the series is known for. Statham makes a formidable antagonist and in several scenes nearly steals the spotlight from Vin Diesel. New additions Natalie Emmanuel and Kurt Russell fit comfortably into the ensemble, while Tony Jaa makes a memorable impression, with more to do than in some of his recent appearances. The central plot revolves around Shaw's vendetta, intertwined with a race to secure a powerful surveillance device that can track anyone on the planet. Unfortunately, the story doesn't quite reach the heights of the previous two films. It's remarkable how far the franchise has evolved since its early days. After a shaky third entry, the fifth and sixth installments revitalized the series and elevated it among top-tier action franchises. By comparison, this chapter feels slightly less focused. One of the biggest issues is how invincible the characters have become. Earlier films required some suspension of disbelief, but here the stunts venture into superhero territory. When characters survive feats that would challenge comic book icons, it becomes harder to stay grounded in their journey. That doesn't make the action dull, far from it. The airborne car drop sequence is thrilling and impressively staged, even if the rapid editing occasionally undercuts the clarity of the spectacle. The ending, without giving anything away, may feel somewhat underwhelming from an action standpoint. However, the emotional farewell dedicated to Walker is undeniably touching and serves as a meaningful send-off. Diesel, Michelle Rodriguez, Tyrese Gibson, Chris Ludacris-Bridges, Johnson, and Walker are all comfortable in their roles at this point. They fully embody these characters. Production was understandably complicated following Walker's death midway through filming, resulting in rewrites and structural adjustments. You can sense some narrative reshuffling, particularly in how certain characters like Hobbs are sidelined for stretches before re-entering at key moments. The villains and overarching plot may not always make perfect sense, but the film's commercial success suggests audiences remain invested. Ultimately, while this installment may not surpass its immediate predecessors, it remains an energetic, high-octane ride that fans of the franchise will likely enjoy. The series shows no signs of stopping, but moving forward. Stronger storytelling and slightly more grounded stakes could help keep the momentum alive. When production resumed after tragedy struck, Furious 7 faced an impossible task: deliver the franchise's trademark chaos while honoring the laws of Paul Walker. Reshoots were arranged, and a digital version of Walker appears in certain moments, and it's noticeable. Whether that was a technological limitation or a deliberate choice to make audiences aware of the tribute is hard to say. Either way, the film leans into that awareness rather than hiding from it, building anticipation toward a farewell that feels intentional, reflective, and, yes, deeply emotional. Some viewers might feel the tone occasionally drifts into seriousness compared to earlier entries, but given the circumstances, that gravity feels earned. The handling of Brian O'Connor's storyline is crafted with care. A particular closing song, You'll Know the One, does much of the emotional heavy lifting, and it's nearly impossible not to feel something as the saga turns a page. The film gives Walker's character a peaceful send-off while clearly signaling that the franchise itself will continue racing forward. Chronologically, the earlier installments existed in what felt like a contained bubble between Too Fast Too Furious and The Fast and the Furious. Tokyo Drift. Furious 7 pushes the timeline forward, and it does so amid behind-the-scenes change. Director Justin Lin exited the series, and James Wan, known for launching the Saw and Insidious franchises, took over. Wan's presence brings a slick, heightened sense of scale, even if the series was already drifting towards superhero territory. The film introduces Deckard Shaw, played with icy confidence by Jason Statham, as the revenge-driven brother of the previous villain, Owen Shaw, portrayed by Luke Evans. Shaw's chemistry with Dwayne Johnson's Hobbs is electric enough that it's no surprise the character's trajectory evolves in later entries. The cast also gains gravitas with Kurt Russell as the mysterious Mr. Nobody. Meanwhile, Tony Jaa fits comfortably into his supporting role, arguably more effectively than in some of his other recent work. And Ronda Rousey pops up in an early appearance filmed around the same time as The Expendables 3. As for the action, it's as outrageous as ever, cars parachuting from cargo planes and landing with improbable precision, a supercar vaulting between skyscrapers, Hobbs literally flexing his way out of a cast before grabbing a massive gun to take down a helicopter. It's bombastic, absurd, and at times unintentionally funny. Realism left this franchise several exits ago. Storytelling has never been the primary engine of this series, and that doesn't change here. If you enjoyed the first 6 films, this installment delivers exactly what you'd expect: speed, stunts, explosions, and unwavering loyalty speeches. Those looking for layered drama or subtle performances won't find them here. Personally, while Van Diesel's stoic delivery doesn't do much for me, performers like Statham, Johnson, and Michelle Rodriguez continue to make the ensemble engaging. Ultimately, Furious 7 isn't groundbreaking cinema, it's loud, excessive, testosterone-fueled entertainment built for a crowd that wants spectacle over subtlety. But within all that chaos lies something unexpectedly sincere, a heartfelt goodbye wrapped inside a blockbuster, and for that reason alone, it earns more than just a passing glance. The 7th chapter of this ever-escalating street racing saga takes things to outrageous new heights and then launches those heights out of an airplane. Letty, Michelle Rodriguez, is still struggling with fractured memories, trying to piece together who she once was. Meanwhile, danger creeps back into Dom's world when Deckard Shaw arrives in Los Angeles and seemingly anywhere else he feels like appearing, carrying a message that past sins have come knocking. Shaw is portrayed as a former British Black Ops operative, a master of stealth and strategy, a man who moves like a phantom even his own former unit is hunting him. As Kurt Russell's shadowy government figure puts it, this turns into a battle between ghosts and shadows. To stop Shaw, who always seems to find them first, the crew must rescue Ramsey, Natalie Emanuel, a brilliant hacker who has developed a near-mythical surveillance program called God's Eye. With it, anyone on the planet can be tracked at the only hope of flipping the chase and hunting the hunter. What follows is essentially a global tour of controlled insanity. Cars parachute out of cargo planes, a high society gala erupts into a formal wear brawl featuring Ronda Rousey. Supercars leap between skyscrapers. Vehicles shrug off gunfire like a mild inconvenience. Airbags apparently no longer exist, and Los Angeles pays the price in spectacular destruction. The physics are optional, the dialogue often gloriously cheesy. At one point the movie practically reinvents what it means to leave audiences on a cliffhanger. It's so absurd that you may find yourself laughing, but often in the way you laugh at something that fully commits to its own madness. Big, loud, and unapologetically excessive. For years the Fast and Furious franchise has satisfied the craving for glossy, high-energy spectacle. I won't claim to remember every detail from each installment. That's not really the point of these films, but the recent entries have perfected the art of big, dumb fun. Going in, I expected overblown nonsense, and to be fair, that's largely what the film delivers. Its aesthetic blends music video flash with video game chaos, a mix that aligns perfectly with its audience. But even within the series' own standards, This entry pushes the limits. Gravity is treated more like a suggestion. Explosions feel less grounded. For action to truly work, there needs to be some investment, some tangible stakes, and here the scale occasionally overwhelms the engagement. When everything is extreme, nothing feels quite as thrilling. Previous entries struck that balance more effectively this time. The spectacle sometimes overshadows the fun. Oddly, the movie also carries itself with a surprising level of earnestness. It's the 7th installment in a long-running saga, so perhaps a touch of melodrama is inevitable, as these are characters audiences have spent years with, so some emotional weight makes sense. The tribute to Paul Walker is handled with care and sincerity, and it genuinely works. Beyond that, however, certain dramatic elements feel stretched and indulgent. Combined with a runtime exceeding 2 hours, the film occasionally feels heavier than its slick, disposable energy suggests it should. Trimming a subplot or two might have sharpened its impact. On the cast, the film brings together an impressive lineup: Natalie Emmanuel, Jimin Hansu, Kurt Russell, Tony Jaa, who thankfully gets a few well-staged moments, and Iggy Azalea in a brief but noticeable role. The core cast delivers what you'd expect. Paul Walker remains effortlessly charismatic, and the final montage reminds us just how central he was to the franchise's identity. His absence is deeply felt. Vin Diesel takes center stage, though he sometimes appears less natural than his co-stars. Kurt Russell clearly enjoys himself, while Dwayne Johnson brings commanding presence even with limited screen time. Jason Statham makes for a formidable antagonist, though the film doesn't quite maximize his potential. Meanwhile, Tyrese Gibson and Ludacris provide reliable comic relief, and Rodriguez ensures Letty remains more than just window dressing. She's one of the few fully realized female characters in the mix. In broad strokes, this 7th outing delivers exactly what fans anticipate: explosive set pieces, globe-trotting chaos, dramatic speeches about family, and a refusal to acknowledge basic physics. It may not capture the tight balance of its immediate predecessors, and its emotional ambitions occasionally overreach. Yet when it embraces its identity all out, ridiculous, and smiling about it, it's difficult not to be entertained. Commercially, it became one of the highest-grossing films ever made. Directed by James Wan, it balances blockbuster bombast with a heartfelt farewell to Paul Walker, whose passing during production casts a poignant shadow over the entire experience. Is it refined cinema? Hardly. Is it absurd? Absolutely. Is it sometimes a blast? Without question. Following the takedown of Owen Shaw and the clearing of their criminal records, Dominic Toretto and his crew finally return home to the United States, hoping to embrace a quieter life. Brian O'Connor is settling into fatherhood, enjoying the simple moments with his family, while Dom focuses on helping Letty Ortiz recover the memories she lost. For a brief time everything seems calm, but peace never lasts long. Owen's older brother, Deckard Shaw, a ruthless former Special Forces operative, is determined to avenge his sibling. With Owen left hospitalized and unconscious, Shaw launches a personal war against Dom's team. He begins by infiltrating the diplomatic security service offices of Agent Luke Hobbs to gather intel on the crew. A brutal fight erupts between Shaw and Hobbs, ending with Shaw escaping after triggering an explosion that leaves Hobbs seriously injured. Tragedy strikes again when Shaw detonates a bomb in Tokyo, killing Han. Dom heads there to bring Han home and crosses paths with Sean Boswell, one of Han's close friends, who hands over belongings recovered from the crash. Han's funeral in Los Angeles becomes yet another battleground when Shaw boldly appears nearby. A tense pursuit follows, but before Dom can confront him, a covert operations unit intervenes. The mysterious leader of that unit, known as Mr. Nobody, proposes a deal. He'll help Dom stop Shaw, but in return, Dom's team must assist in recovering a powerful surveillance program called God's Eye. The software can track anyone through digital devices worldwide, effectively turning technology into a weapon. To secure it, they must rescue its creator, Ramsey, from a dangerous mercenary named Mose Jacand. What follows is one of the film's most outrageous sequences. The team parachutes their cars from a plane over the Caucasus Mountains to ambush Jacand's convoy. After successfully rescuing Ramsey, they learn the program is now in Abu Dhabi. The mission leads them to a lavish high-rise party hosted by a wealthy buyer who now possesses the device. In typical fashion, the retrieval involves hand-to-hand combat, high-speed chases, and an unforgettable supercar stunt that sends Dom and Brian flying between skyscrapers. Despite regaining control of God's Eye, things spiral when Deckard ambushes the team and seizes the program. The final confrontation shifts to Los Angeles, where multiple battles unfold simultaneously. Brian promises Mia he will retire once Shaw is dealt with, reinforcing the emotional weight of the mission. Hobbs, defying medical advice, re-enters the fight in spectacular fashion. While Ramsey works to disable God's Eye, the climax delivers explosive chaos. Dom and Shaw engage in a fierce showdown, only for Deckard to intervene with aerial firepower. In a daring final move, Dom sacrifices his car to take down Deckard's helicopter, leading to a fiery conclusion. Dom is pulled from the wreckage, presumed dead, until Letty confesses her memories have returned, including their wedding day, prompting Dom's quiet but powerful revival. With Shaw imprisoned and the immediate threat over, the team gathers one last time. Brian chooses family over the fast life, and the film closes on an emotional farewell between him and Dom at a quiet crossroads. Without dramatic speeches, they simply drive off in separate directions, a subtle yet heartfelt tribute to their brotherhood. The movie blends high-octane action with surprisingly emotional moments, serving as both a thrilling chapter in the franchise and a touching send-off to one of its core characters. It's bigger, louder, and more outrageous than ever, yet at its heart it remains about loyalty, family, and the road shared between friends. Vin Diesel once again steps confidently into the role of team leader, anchoring the film with his trademark intensity, while Paul Walker delivers a heartfelt final performance. With the help of his younger brothers, Caleb and Cody, along with impressively seamless CGI, his remaining scenes are handled with care and respect. The supporting cast shares plenty of sharp, humorous exchanges, and Jason Statham makes for a convincingly ruthless antagonist. While much of the franchise has traditionally leaned toward spectacle over storytelling, this installment benefits from a more thoughtfully constructed narrative, particularly the emotional farewell to Walker. The tribute sequence, underscored by the chart-topping, Golden Globe-nominated See You Again by Wiz Khalifa featuring Charlie Puth, which famously surpassed Gangnam Style as the most viewed video on YouTube at 1.8, provides a fitting and moving send-off. Of course, the film doesn't shy away from its signature excess. Cars parachute from airplanes and skyscrapers become racetracks. The physics-defying action borders on absurd, but that's part of the charm. Between the fleet of exotic supercars, explosive set pieces, high-speed pursuits, and gravity-defying stunts, the movie fully embraces its identity as a wildly entertaining action thriller. Having previously watched The Fate of the Furious and Hobbs Shaw without seeing this chapter, I assumed it wouldn't make much difference. After all, these films often follow a familiar formula: outrageous action, impossibly durable heroes, sleek cars, glamorous characters, and logic-defying scenarios. And in many ways that assumption holds true here. The central plot revolves around stopping villains from exploiting a powerful surveillance system capable of locating anyone anywhere on Earth, while Deckard Shaw seeks revenge for his brother, targeting Dominic Toretto and his crew. The storyline itself isn't particularly groundbreaking, but director James Wan commits fully to delivering large-scale cinematic chaos. He prioritizes spectacle over realism, crafting some of the most over-the-top destruction ever seen in a blockbuster. Expensive cars are obliterated, buildings collapse, and yet the core team walks away from high-speed collisions and gravity-defying leaps without so much as a bruise. Realism clearly isn't the goal here, and anyone searching for a grounded storytelling may leave disappointed. Fans of the franchise, however, will likely revel in moments such as Dom and Brian launching a W motorcycle in hypersport between towering Abu Dhabi skyscrapers, or Dwayne Johnson wielding a massive minigun with unapologetic bravado. Personally, some of the standout sequences for me include Tony Jaa's impressive martial arts performance as a relentless henchman, and the fierce showdown between Letty, Michelle Rodriguez, and Abu Dhabi bodyguard Kara. played by MMA fighter Ronda Rousey. Following the events of Fast Furious 6, where Dom and his crew defeated Owen Shaw in London, they believe they've finally earned some peace. They underestimate, however, Owen's older brother Deckard, a former elite soldier determined to settle the score. Having already taken Han's life in Tokyo, Deckard begins systematically targeting the rest of the team. Hobbs is left hospitalized after a devastating explosion, and Toretto's home is destroyed in another attack that nearly claims Brian and his family. At Han's funeral, Dom confronts Shaw, but their clash is interrupted by a covert operative known only as Mr. Nobody. He offers Dom and his crew a deal: rescue a hacker named Ramsey from a terrorist organization led by Moshe Kant. Ramsey has created a powerful program called God's Eye, capable of accessing global surveillance cameras and using facial recognition to track anyone within minutes. In exchange for retrieving Ramsey, Dom will gain access to the system to locate Shaw. The mission that follows is anything but simple. The team parachutes inside their cars onto a mountain road in the Caucasus. They later vault a hypercar between skyscrapers in Abu Dhabi, and eventually return to Los Angeles for a climactic showdown involving a helicopter gunship and a missile-equipped drone. All the while, the inevitable rematch between Dom and Shaw looms. If you enjoy relentless, larger-than-life action, this film delivers in abundance. It wastes little time on exposition before diving headfirst into near-constant chaos. Say explosions, car chases, gunfire, hand-to-hand combat, and CGI-enhanced stunts dominate the screen. After all, no stunt driver is realistically jumping a supercar across multiple skyscrapers without a little cinematic magic. It may not redefine storytelling, but as an unapologetic adrenaline rush packed with spectacle and emotion, it absolutely accomplishes what it sets out to do. By the 7th chapter of this long-running franchise, the spectacle has grown to almost mythic proportions. We're talking cars parachuting from aircraft, gravity-defying leaps between skyscrapers, armored vehicles plowing through city streets, and mountain road chases that look like they were designed in a teenager's daydream. The set pieces are louder, faster, and more outrageous than ever, and that's exactly the point. But what truly anchors the film isn't the chaos, it's the camaraderie. Over the course of 7 installments, the core cast has built a believable bond that elevates the material. The dynamic between Vin Diesel's Dominic Toretto and Paul Walker's Brian O'Connor remains the emotional backbone of the story. Their on-screen brotherhood culminates in a heartfelt farewell that resonates deeply, serving as a tribute to Walker, who tragically passed away before filming was completed. Through a combination of stand-ins, visual effects, and carefully integrated footage, the production manages to honor his legacy in a way that feels sincere rather than exploitative. The supporting ensemble continues to deliver. Michelle Rodriguez returns as Letty, navigating her character's lingering memory struggles. Dwayne Johnson brings his usual larger-than-life presence as Hobbs. A standout addition is Jason Statham as Deckard Shaw, a relentless former Black Ops operative bent on revenge. Statham injects the film with a fresh jolt of menace and physical intensity. Meanwhile, Kurt Russell steps in as the shadowy Mr. Nobody, adding a slick, strategic edge to the team's mission. As for the story or lack thereof, the narrative centers on a crew of elite drivers recruited to rescue a brilliant hacker whose surveillance technology has drawn dangerous attention. From there, the plot serves mostly as connective tissue between increasingly extravagant action sequences. Logic often takes a back seat to spectacle. Scenes don't always flow naturally, instead feeling like adrenaline spikes stitched together for maximum impact. For viewers seeking airtight storytelling or grounded realism, this entry won't change your mind about the franchise. Subtlety and plausibility are not on the menu. Dialogue can be heavy-handed, motivations occasionally thin, and physics completely optional. Yet that absurdity is part of its appeal. A franchise at full throttle. Not everyone will appreciate the bombast, but the box office success speaks volumes about the series' popularity. These films understand their audience, people who want to feel the roar of engines, the shockwave of explosions, and the rush of pure escapism. On that level, the movie delivers exactly what it promises. What sets this installment apart is the emotional undercurrent. The closing sequence, two cars driving side by side before taking separate paths at a fork in the road, lands with surprising grace. It's simple, understated, and profoundly symbolic. In the end, this chapter may not be a masterclass in narrative depth, but it succeeds where it matters most for fans of the saga. It blends outrageous action with genuine sentiment, making it one of the more memorable entries in the series. For those who have followed these characters from the beginning, it feels less like just another sequel and more like a meaningful milestone. It isn't mindless and over the top in the way the Expendables films often are, and it doesn't suffer from the jittery, hypercut restlessness that characterizes the Bourne series. Instead, this movie finds a sweet spot between high-octane spectacle, intelligence, and genuine emotion, a combination that makes it ideal blockbuster material. The action sequences are phenomenal. The moment where a car soars from one skyscraper to another is breathtaking, though surprisingly not even the standout scene. There are countless sequences that had me gripping my seat and holding my breath. One especially nerve-shredding moment involves Paul Walker attempting to escape from a bus. It's staged with such intensity that I genuinely felt frozen in suspense. Despite being packed wall-to-wall with action, the film never feels disjointed or chaotic. That cohesion is what elevates it above many modern action movies. Furious 7 keeps raising the stakes. Just when I thought the film had shown me everything it had to offer, it would escalate things even further. The constant escalation left me genuinely impressed. Few would have predicted that James Wan, previously known for crafting chilling horror films, would deliver something this massive and exhilarating. To be honest, this franchise was never really aimed at someone like me. I lost interest after the third installment. Back then the series felt like a flashy teenage spin on Top Gear, drenched in gloss and muscle and edited with the kind of rapid-fire style that makes even Michael Bay look restrained by comparison. So I approached Furious 7 mainly out of curiosity, and perhaps a touch of somber intrigue, knowing it would feature Paul Walker in his final role after his tragic passing during production. For roughly the first act, the film unfolds exactly as expected: roaring engines, explosive set pieces, thumping soundtrack cues, gravity-defying stunts, slow-motion glamour shots, and bone-crunching fight scenes. Jason Statham essentially plays his signature tough guy persona, delivering it with his usual confidence. Yet somewhere along the way I began noticing how far this series has drifted from its origins. The original film centered on a relatively grounded premise: an undercover cop infiltrating a street racing crew in Los Angeles. It wasn't groundbreaking, but it was straightforward and believable within its world. This installment, however, operates on an entirely different scale. It feels closer in spirit to a globe-trotting spy fantasy, or a superhero-adjacent universe, than a street racing drama. The action is extravagant and wildly exaggerated, at times completely absurd, but surprisingly I wasn't bored. The audience around me, clearly devoted fans, reveled in every punchline and punch thrown. There's also a subtle self-awareness woven into the final act as the film acknowledges the loss of one of its core cast members and offers a farewell that feels heartfelt rather than exploitative. In that sense it functions not just as another sequel, but as a tribute. Looking back, I was more impressed than I anticipated. Some of that may stem from having skipped several entries and not witnessing the franchise's gradual evolution. I doubt it will convert skeptics who never cared for the series, and I'm not rushing to revisit the installments I missed. But for a longtime fans who embraced the Fast and the Furious from the beginning and stayed along for the ride, this chapter delivers exactly what they want. If you were unaware that Paul Walker tragically died in a car accident on November 30, 2013, you likely wouldn't detect any disruption while watching Furious 7. Director James Wan and screenwriter Chris Morgan had completed roughly half of the $250 million production before Walker's death. The finished film stands both as a high-adrenaline action spectacle and as a cinematic farewell to an actor whose career became inseparable from this franchise. When the original The Fast and the Furious debuted in 2001, it exceeded expectations as a street racing thriller about an undercover officer, elevating Vin Diesel's box office presence while launching Paul Walker into mainstream recognition. In many ways, Furious 7 represents how far that modest beginning has evolved from street-level crime drama to globe-spanning, physics-defying action saga, and it embraces that transformation without apology. When Paul Walker continued the franchise alongside Tyrese Gibson after Vin Diesel stepped away from Too Fast Too Furious, 2003, few could have predicted how massive the series would become. Diesel later resurfaced with a brief cameo in Tokyo Drift, 2006, a film that, while divisive among fans, I'd argue marked an improvement over what came before it. The installments that followed injected new life into the saga, steadily transforming it from street racing drama into globe-trotting spectacle. Even the heartbreaking loss of Walker couldn't stall the momentum of Furious 7. Let's be clear, Furious 7 isn't cinematic high art, but in terms of sustained franchise energy, very few modern series can rival the Fast and the Furious. Aside from juggernauts like the James Bond films or the Harry Potter saga, it's hard to name another contemporary series that has maintained this many sequels with such commercial force. Whether or not the road continues beyond this chapter, Furious 7 feels like a defining high point. Director James Wan and writer Chris Morgan double down on the franchise's appetite for outrageous action. The stunts are physics-defying, borderline absurd, and undeniably thrilling to watch. New additions, including Jason Statham, Kurt Russell, Jimin Hansu, and martial arts standout Tony Jaa, inject fresh intensity into the established cast dynamic. If this is your first entry into the series, prepare to be entertained and then prepare to catch up. The events build directly on Fast Furious 6, where diplomatic security service agent Luke Hobbs convinces Dominic Toretto to reunite his crew Brian O'Connor, Roman Pierce, Tej Parker, and Han A to take down the calculating mercenary Owen Shaw. In exchange, Dom and his team are promised clean slates. A photograph of Letty, long presumed dead, strengthens Dom's resolve and adds emotional weight to the mission. When Furious 7 opens, the threat escalates. Owen Shaw's brother, Deckard Shaw, emerges as a relentless force bent on revenge. He begins his retaliation by killing Han in Tokyo and then ruthlessly dispatching guards at the hospital where his brother lies injured. Deckard's mission is simple: make everyone involved in Owen's downfall pay. He soon tracks the team to Los Angeles, confronts Hobbs, and the two engage in a brutal, destructive clash that leaves DSS headquarters in shambles. Hobbs survives, but barely. Deckard's next move is personal. A bomb detonates at Dom's home, destroying the symbolic house that once represented family unity. Thankfully no lives are lost, but the emotional blow lands hard. Meanwhile, Brian faces a quieter challenge, adjusting to fatherhood. Mia has already given birth to their son, Jack, and is secretly expecting another child. Watching Brian attempt the everyday task of daycare drop-off in a minivan provides one of the film's lighter, more human moments. From his hospital bed, Hobbs urges Dom to stop Deckard. Their rivalry escalates at Han's funeral, where Dom and Deckard literally collide in a head-on crash. Before their battle can escalate further, a covert operations team led by the enigmatic Mr. Nobody intervenes. Mr. Nobody offers Dom a deal to help recover a powerful surveillance device known as God's Eye, and in return he'll help track down Deckard. The device, capable of locating anyone anywhere, is described as a game-changer in global intelligence. However, its key component is in the hands of a brilliant hacker named Ramsey, who is being held hostage by the extremist Moj Jakand. Jakand wants the technology for himself, setting the stage for a mission that will push Dom's crew into yet another high-risk, globe-spanning operation. After a barrage of wild, physics-defying action sequences, the crew ultimately achieves their objective, but Deckard, Shaw and Jakand certainly don't make the journey easy. Director James Wan keeps the tempo relentless, rarely allowing the spectacle to stall. Impressively, he weaves Paul Walker's presence into the film with surprising fluidity, ensuring Brian O'Connor remains central to the adventure. One standout sequence unfolds along a winding mountain highway, where the team attempts to rescue Ramsey from a heavily armored bus outfitted with multiple rotary cannons. In a heart-stopping moment, Brian ends up clinging to the side of the wrecked vehicle as it dangles over a steep cliff. He scrambles across the bus just seconds before it plunges into the canyon below. Wan stages several pulse-pounding chase scenes, but perhaps the most outrageous stunt involves launching a multi-million-dollar hypercar through not one but two skyscrapers in Abu Dhabi in pursuit of Ramsey's tracking device. At times Furious 7 feels less like a street racing saga and more like a globe-trotting spy blockbuster packed with sporadic chaos. The film closes with a heartfelt tribute and a sincere farewell to Paul Walker that brings unexpected emotion to what is arguably the most turbocharged installment in the franchise. It also feels like a celebratory lap for a series that began modestly in 2001 and has since grown into a cinematic juggernaut. And while this chapter offers a sense of closure, few doubt the franchise will continue if nothing else. Its box office power guarantees it. The familiar ensemble returns: Vin Diesel as Dom Toretto, Paul Walker as Brian O'Connor, Jordana Brewster as Mia, Michelle Rodriguez as Letty, still wrestling with memory loss, Tyrese Gibson and Chris Ludacris-Bridges as the ever-bickering Roman and Tej, and Dwayne Johnson as the indestructible Agent Hobbs. New faces join the chaos, including Jimon Hounsou as a ruthless militant, Ronda Rousey and Tony Jaa as formidable enforcers, Natalie Emmanuel as tech genius Ramsey, and Kurt Russell as a mysterious government operative pulling strings from the shadows. The most notable addition is Jason Statham as Deckard Shaw, the calculating older brother of Owen Shaw from the previous film. His vendetta fuels much of the plot and gives the movie a personal edge. What began as a modest street racing film has transformed into a full-blown action spectacle. The franchise thrives on its loyal cast, straightforward storytelling, eye-catching supercars, and ever-escalating stunts. Early in the film, audiences are treated to a brutal showdown between Hobbs and Shaw, a clash intense enough to serve as a finale in most action movies. Instead it sets up a later punchline involving Hobbs and an inconveniently timed arm injury. Midway through, Letty faces off briefly with Rousey's character in a fight that feels shorter than expected. The ultimate confrontation, however, pits Dom against Shaw in a rooftop battle that unfolds with dramatic pauses and extended cutaways, almost making you forget the fight is still ongoing. Between these massive showdowns, the film delivers spectacle after spectacle: Brian racing up a collapsing bus, a heavily armed drone wreaking havoc, high-speed pursuits featuring a stealth helicopter, cars parachuting from 10,000 feet in synchronized fashion, and the now famous leap between the Etihad Towers in Abu Dhabi courtesy of a striking red light and hypersport that certainly won't retain much resale value afterward. Character moments are sprinkled throughout the mayhem. Letty struggles with fragmented memories. Roman and Tej trade quips like a classic comedy duo. Dom dispenses gravel-voiced wisdom about family, and Shaw stalks the crew with the cold efficiency of a guided missile. Everyone gets a moment to pose, brood, or smirk for the camera. Calling the film over the top almost feels inadequate, as though we've somehow already redefined where the top is. This installment pushes the boundaries of scale and spectacle into the stratosphere. It's loud, fast, and unapologetically excessive, catering directly to its devoted fan base. I wouldn't consider myself a die-hard follower of the franchise, having only seen the original before this entry. My main motivation for watching was to witness the tribute to Paul Walker, and admittedly, to maintain my personal streak of seeing every Kurt Russell appearance and no further explanation necessary. I walked into this film with fairly modest expectations, but I have to admit it genuinely surprised me. While I understand why the franchise has such massive global appeal, this installment feels like a major step up in scale and emotion. Fans will definitely appreciate the vision of director James Wan, known for Saw and The Conjuring, who steps in to replace longtime series director Justin Lin. Wan brings a different flavor to the franchise, blending intensity with spectacle in a way that feels fresh yet faithful. Let's be honest, storytelling hasn't exactly been the strongest element in the previous installments, and this film continues that tradition. The script isn't groundbreaking, but that's not really why we watch these movies. We come for the action, and this one delivers in outrageous style. The car stunts are wildly imaginative, often defying physics in the most entertaining way possible. Each action set piece seems bigger and bolder than the last. The movie kicks off by introducing a formidable new antagonist, played with icy determination by Jason Statham as Deckard Shaw, and from there the pace barely slows down. The team's mission revolves around tracking down a powerful surveillance device, which leads to explosive confrontations and high-speed pursuits. Once the chase truly begins, the film rarely takes a breath, especially during the extended climax, which unleashes nearly 25 minutes of relentless action and jaw-dropping vehicle stunts. Every cast member plays their part well. Vin Diesel continues to anchor the film with his commanding presence as Dominic Toretto, balancing toughness with emotional depth. Paul Walker, in his final appearance as Brian O'Connor, delivers a heartfelt performance that resonates deeply. Dwayne Johnson has a shorter role than many might expect, but still makes an impact whenever he appears. The supporting additions add extra flavor to the story. Kurt Russell brings charisma as the mysterious Mr. Nobody, while Natalie Emmanuel fits in naturally with the crew, and villainous presences like Jim Hounsou and Tony G help raise the stakes, each getting moments to shine. What truly sets this film apart, however, is its emotional core. Beneath the exaggerated action and near-anime levels of spectacle, the theme of family remains central. The final few minutes are devoted to a tribute to Paul Walker, and it's handled with surprising grace and sincerity. It doesn't feel forced, it feels earned. The closing montage and farewell scene are deeply moving, leaving audiences misty-eyed without being overly sentimental. Clocking in at nearly 2.5 hours, the film never drags. Director James Wan adapts his stylistic background impressively, using tight close-ups and dynamic tracking shots to make every punch, crash, and explosion feel immediate. Even outside horror territory, you can sense his ability to build tension through lighting and camera movement. In the end, this movie is all about that final ride. It's loud, over the top, and unapologetically extravagant, but it's also heartfelt, a fitting send-off to one of the most entertaining action franchises of the modern era. For fans of the series, it's a must-watch. For others, it's a high-octane spectacle worth experiencing on the big screen. And above all, it's for Paul. After watching the film, it almost feels unreal how well everything came together. I never really looked into the behind-the-scenes details after Paul Walker's heartbreaking passing in 2013, but I genuinely worried this would turn into an awkward patchwork, something like how The Rise of Skywalker handled Carrie Fisher's scenes. Thankfully, that fear never materialized for most of the runtime. It truly feels like Walker was present throughout the film, either because he had already filmed a significant portion, or because the production team handled his remaining scenes with incredible care and subtlety. However they achieved it, the decisions felt respectful and thoughtful. The farewell sequence arrives somewhat abruptly, but it's emotionally earned. The film subtly prepares you for it earlier on, and by the time it happens you're already vulnerable. Any digital enhancements used in that final stretch are almost impossible to scrutinize, because you're too busy wiping away tears. It's genuinely powerful. I'll be honest, when I first got into this franchise, I thought it was ridiculous. I even knew roughly how Furious 7 would conclude long before I actually sat down to watch any of the films, and still, those last 5 to 10 minutes hit with overwhelming force. The ending is sincere, bittersweet, and deeply moving. Paul Walker brought warmth and heart to the series, and I connected with his character early on. Honestly, before I ever warmed up to Vin Diesel. Though Diesel eventually won me over, that wasn't the case in the first film. Outside of the emotional finale, Furious 7 feels largely on par with Fast Furious 6, though this installment leans even further into stylish, sometimes chaotic camera work during the action scenes. James Wan definitely left his mark. A few supporting characters appear to exit the stage, though in this franchise departures are rarely permanent. Jason Statham steps in as the primary villain and delivers a more imposing presence than Luke Evans did previously. Dwayne Johnson's screen time is slightly reduced, while Kurt Russell joins the franchise and fits in effortlessly. He's used perfectly here. Yes, it's excessive. Yes, it's over the top. But the pacing feels tighter than the previous entry, and the spectacle is undeniably entertaining. Watching the series finally connect its timeline to Tokyo Drift was also a satisfying touch, considering that film technically takes place after the events of 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6, and that ending, I know I'm years late reacting to it, but it still worked on me. It's a heartfelt send-off to Walker, and the emotional weight lingers long after the credits roll. By this point the franchise has fully embraced its larger-than-life identity. The crew are basically superheroes now, not just talented drivers but nearly indestructible action icons capable of surviving the impossible. Deckard Shaw, seeking revenge for his hospitalized brother Owen, makes a dramatic entrance by targeting the family directly, killing Han, injuring Hobbs, and attacking the Toretto home. The stakes escalate further when the team partners with the mysterious Mr. Nobody to rescue Ramsey, the creator of a powerful global tracking system known as God's Eye. The set pieces are massive and memorable, especially the Abu Dhabi skyscraper sequence and Ramsey's daring rescue. As a complete package, this might be the strongest entry in the series. Statham brings a much-needed intensity as a villain who genuinely feels like a threat to the family. It's wild to think how quickly he transitioned into an ally later on, given how personal his actions are here. Of course, the film is undeniably silly at times, full of macho bravado and occasionally lacking subtle humor, but this installment carries a surprising emotional core. With Walker's passing during production, the movie transforms its conclusion into a tribute, and it handles that responsibility with care. As someone who's followed these films over the years, though I didn't really start diving into reviews until around 2018, revisiting Furious 7 reminds me why it stands out in the franchise. The story moves at a strong pace, the humor lands, the soundtrack energizes every major moment, and the action delivers exactly what fans show up for. For me, it remains one of the very best in the series. Let me start with something positive. I genuinely love that Jason Statham's character becomes a major presence not just here but across multiple later installments, including the spin-off Hobbs Shaw, which I actually think is a blast. It's wild how this franchise keeps escalating. Every movie seems determined to outdo the last in terms of chaos. The stunts get more ridiculous each time, and honestly I still can't wrap my head around how they pulled off that cliff drop sequence. That was a full-on adrenaline spike. Very few people on Earth would even attempt something like that. Maybe I'm overanalyzing it. That could just be exhaustion talking, but still, it's intense. That said, Furious 7 is where things start shifting hard into full-blown comic book territory. The film follows Deckard Shaw, Jason Statham, who is seeking revenge after his brother was taken down in the previous entry. Shaw wastes no time making his presence known, brutally confronting Hobbs, Dwayne Johnson, and sending him to the hospital after hacking into secure files to track down Dom's crew. From there, the story centers on Shaw methodically targeting each member of the team. There's also a side mission involving the rescue of a hacker whose technology is key to stopping Shaw. The plot tries to weave espionage elements into the mix, and Kurt Russell shows up as a government operative recruiting Dom and his crew for a mutually beneficial operation. On paper it sounds layered, in execution it often feels cluttered. Vin Diesel returns as Dom, fiercely protective of his family, both literal and chosen. His emotional anchor revolves around Letty, Michelle Rodriguez, who is still dealing with amnesia. Meanwhile, Paul Walker's Brian is preparing for fatherhood again with Mia, adding a softer, more grounded element to the otherwise explosive narrative. Tragically, Walker passed away before filming wrapped, and the tribute montage at the end is undeniably heartfelt. Hey, whatever issues I have with the film, that farewell scene hits hard. Now, here's where my frustration kicks in. I'll be blunt, I really didn't enjoy this movie. The action is enormous, a skyscraper to skyscraper car jumps, endless explosions, physics that seem to operate on vibes instead of science, but it feels like spectacle for spectacle's sake. The franchise once revolved around street racing and relatively grounded characters. Here it plays like a superhero ensemble where nobody can get hurt unless the script demands it. The amount of coincidences and last-second saves becomes exhausting. Jason Statham, while physically imposing, feels like he's playing the same hyper-cool persona he always does. Deckard Shaw should be menacing, but instead he often feels like a recycled archetype. I kept thinking, haven't I seen this exact performance before? The tone also shifts strangely. The film tries to balance humor, grief, revenge, and over-the-top action, but the mix doesn't always work. Tyrese Gibson returns as comic relief, though the jokes undercut tension more than they enhance it. With so many characters and multiple factions operating at once, the narrative starts to feel overcrowded. At some point I stopped caring who was chasing whom, and started wondering when Dom's crew became so comfortable mowing people down without hesitation. The moral line seems to blur beyond recognition. It starts resembling a stylized assassin franchise more than a car-centric action series. Yes, there are impressive sequences. Yes, the scale is ambitious, but the heavy CGI and gravity-defying stunts begin to lose impact because nothing feels at risk. Bigger doesn't automatically mean better. In the end, Furious 7 aims to be the biggest and boldest entry yet, and in some ways it succeeds. It's louder, more emotional, and technically polished. But for me, it also marks the point where the series leaves reality completely behind. The tribute to Paul Walker is sincere and beautifully handled. That final drive into the sunset is the part that truly works. Everything else, mileage may vary dramatically. The sequence where a supercar launches itself from one skyscraper to another is completely ridiculous. I get that this franchise has never been grounded in strict realism, but that moment crossed into pure fantasy. With a runtime pushing close to 2 hours and 20 minutes, the movie easily overstays its welcome by at least half an hour. At several points I genuinely forgot certain main characters were even part of the story, because the screen time is sliced between far too many faces. I didn't enjoy it much the first time I watched it, and revisiting it only made the flaws more obvious. It's the kind of film that fades from memory almost immediately. Honestly, what was the central plot again? Something about revenge and a hacker? It's hard to say, because the movie seems far more interested in spectacle than storytelling, and spectacle is what you get. Cars tearing through cities, cars being dropped out of planes, cars smashing into towers, cars chased by helicopters and drones, collapsing buildings, and yes, more cars. Ironically, the automotive chaos often feels forced, as if the filmmakers were scrambling to justify vehicle stunts in situations that didn't really call for them. Performance-wise, Jason Statham plays a convincingly menacing antagonist and carries that cool, dangerous energy well. Dwayne Johnson remains physically imposing as expected, but Vin Diesel dominates the screen here. He's portrayed almost like an unstoppable force. If you're looking for explosive action sequences that ignore logic entirely, this movie certainly delivers. That said, for what was supposed to be a major installment in such a massive franchise, I hoped for something with a bit more emotional or narrative weight. Instead we get repeated speeches about loyalty and family, mixed with jaw-dropping levels of property destruction, likely racking up fictional damages in the tens of millions just to eliminate 2 assassins and rescue a hacker. Compared to the 2 previous entries, this chapter feels weaker across the board. Earlier films had outrageous moments too, but they maintained a certain balance and flow in their action scenes. Here, the editing feels chaotic, with heavy use of shaky camera work that makes the fight sequences difficult to follow. The combat lacks the smooth choreography that made earlier installments more satisfying. It's clear the directing style shifted as the tone tries to be more dramatic and emotionally heavy, but it doesn't always land. Some characters who were central in previous films have smaller roles here, and the team dynamic doesn't feel as cohesive or entertaining as before. In past entries, each member had a defined specialty. This time around, everyone seems equally capable of fighting and shooting, which blurs their individuality. Statham's villain, while compelling, feels underutilized. Plot-wise, the story picks up after Dominic Toretto and his crew have supposedly left their criminal past behind following the defeat of a dangerous enemy, but revenge comes knocking in the form of the fallen villain's brother, who begins targeting the team one by one. At the same time, A powerful surveillance program capable of weaponizing global technology becomes the center of a tug-of-war between terrorists and shadowy government forces. Naturally, Dom reunites the crew to confront the new threat and secure the device. The core cast returns, bringing together the familiar ensemble that fans know well. And speaking of the cast, it's impossible to ignore the real-life tragedy surrounding Paul Walker's passing during production. The tribute woven into the film's final moments is handled with care and will undoubtedly move longtime fans. It's one of the few genuinely heartfelt elements in the movie. Still, once the cars start parachuting out of cargo planes, the film abandons any pretense of restraint. From that point forward it becomes a relentless barrage of exaggerated action. If this had been a standalone spy thriller in the vein of a James Bond or Mission Impossible adventure, the absurdity might have been easier to accept, but as part of this long-running franchise, it feels like it lost touch with what once made it enjoyable. In the end, devoted fans of high-octane action will likely be satisfied. There are plenty of explosions, daring stunts, and globe-trotting set pieces, but for viewers hoping for meaningful storytelling or tighter execution, this installment may feel bloated and overly indulgent. We do get some proper car chases, and right at the beginning there's a great moment where a German muscle car loses ground to an American one. That part worked well, but overall the focus leans much more toward large-scale action than actual car culture. The sequence with cars jumping between skyscrapers just doesn't sit right with me. In a Fast and Furious movie it left me with mixed feelings. The ending is clearly designed to set up Part 8. But honestly I'd prefer if the franchise shifted gears back toward the cars instead of escalating the spectacle even further. Part 6 struck a better balance and delivered action without going so far over the top that it became distracting. And first off, if you're too young to have seen Kurt Russell in Soldier, pause right here and go track it down. Seriously, I wouldn't want anyone walking away thinking Russell, who started out as a Disney child actor in the 1950s, is just some older guy in a suit playing a quick-witted government agent.